Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Faith.
It's nice to see you, Eli.
Nice to see you too. I'm sitting here with Faith Nice. It's a trifecta here. I think it's our third time sitting together. Four, actually, if you include the webinar we did back in 2020.
Yeah, it's always an honor to be here, and I'm excited to get to speak again. And I was thinking on my way here about our last couple conversations and just the progression of it all, and then coming into the house and like being here. It's such a different experience the third time because I know what to expect, but also like I'm not afraid of what we're going to talk about. You know, like being a woman is an easy conversation to have. Being a woman.
Is that what you're thinking? That's where you're going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
what aspects?
I think that other conversations that we have, I have to come from my professional brain.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas talking about a women's retreat, I'm coming from just lived experience. I mean, I think I'm really transparent and vulnerable about other lived experiences when we've talked before, but yes. I don't feel like I have to have all my knowledge in front of my brain. This is what I live every day, as being a female, being a woman, going through my own process of healing my feminine energy and embracing and continuing to learn about what it means to be a woman in today's day and age, and the culture that I'm in, and the family system that I'm in.
Right, that's what I was actually wondering about when you first launched your retreat. So let's about that. A couple weeks after this will be launched, you're hosting a retreat at the House of More. Thank you very much for your for using that space for this. And my first thought when I saw it is like, why a women's retreat? Because you work with both men and women, mm-hmm. and I don't know if it's more men or more women, but I know anecdotally from the podcast we did, many men reached out mm-hmm. Asking for your contact information.
Yeah, so it's interesting. As a therapist, I work predominantly with men.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm more limited on female clients. I typically, in school, my specialty work was about focus on how to treat men specifically, and then my training in the CSAT model was more, unfortunately, it is more of a bias towards treating men than women.
What?
Treating men.
CSAT.
Certified sex addiction therapist training that I did in my postgraduate work. They're very mindful to be balanced about female sex and love addiction as well, but there's so much shame for women typically in coming for treatment with that I just trended towards seeing more male clients. I think it was also I think there's a spiritual component there for me, like my need to heal whatever that was about masculine energy and working with men in particular, or my own biases about men that I had to work through. But in that process, I also had to work on my identity as a woman and what that actually meant. So while I treat men in particular, I think the balance of that is that in my personal life, I've had to really reconcile what was harmful for me as a woman, what it meant for me to be a woman, and what I wanted to become as a woman in the world. So, which is an ever-evolving process.
So, the retreat is for women, but towards what aspect?
When we came up with the retreat, so it's interesting because you launched the Adama retreat. And a couple days later, I was sitting with Shauna Rubelo, who's also doing mm-hmm. logistics for the retreat. And I was like, we were talking about, like, what's next for you? What do you want to be doing? What do you want to be working towards? And she said, well, I would love to do a women's retreat.
She said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I love doing group work and retreats. That sounds cool. Yeah, maybe we'll do it. And this was, like I said, probably right after you launched.
Yeah, I think ours was in October.
Yeah, it was right around like the high holiday, Jewish holiday time.
Right.
And it kind of just fell flat there. We didn't follow up. We didn't start planning or organizing. It was just this little tossed out idea. And then after the completion of your retreat, there was a couple of women that would be like, you know what, somebody should do a women's one. Like, I got that feedback. And I thought about the conversation I had with Shauna, and I was like, so maybe we should do it. Why not?
Right.
I don't think that it was formed from the idea that there's something specific. It was formed from what's aligned with my passion, what's aligned with the other facilitators' passions, where we're at in life. I am currently at this moment 35 weeks pregnant. So it's like, I knew I was pregnant when we were developing this program, and I was like, this is such a balance of the energy that I'm bringing into the world right now, and what we can focus on during the retreat is like offering the women this space where they can learn about how we are designed to create in a way that's beyond comprehension, that's beyond what we could understand, like this miraculous sort of event that is occurring, and whether or not a woman is pregnant. I don't think motherhood defines womanhood, but I think the metaphor of pregnancy is such a good way to start to understand femininity.
Say more.
So, let me take a deep breath. The baby's in my diaphragm. So while womanhood is not defined by motherhood, the metaphor for femininity is that I'm a receptacle that is given something that I then transform into what was not recognizable before, that creates in the world something new and changes what was previously present. And I don't think that women think of themselves, I was not brought up being taught that like you are a portal for all that is good or all that could be toxic in the world. Like, I wasn't given the messages about how powerful women really were. I was given that the message that women might feel threatened by other women, or there's competition, or everybody's going to want something from you, or everybody's going to violate you, but not that women are the actual vessel between the metaphysical and the physical realm. Which is a little trippy. Like, I get the language is like a little out there, but
Right, but there's something happening that we can get used to, but it's miraculous.
yeah. And I think this is where it's like the metaphor for femininity and pregnancy is that I have the capacity within myself to create something that I am then nurturing and developing in the world, which is the same thing as this women's retreat. It's the same energy. I'm creating something in the world that me and a team of women are developing and nurturing and fostering so that other women can come and nurture themselves and foster and grow and receive and then transform their worlds individually. And the power of femininity is the power of transformation from what was not able to be seen into something that could be tangible, change, hopefully for the good.
So you mentioned that for the retreat, you're approaching it more from you as an individual versus you as a clinician. Does that mean, should someone expect that from you during the retreat itself?
Yeah, I mean, my role as far as what I'm actively facilitating is to do some experiential type of work or psychodrama, inner child work. And I think that type of transformational work, but done in a non-therapeutic way, is what they can expect. It's very hard to leave my therapist identity at the door, but this is definitely not about diagnosing or treatment of clinical cases. This is about enriching myself as a person and enriching the women that are joining as people. And part of enriching ourselves or growing and developing or changing past rigid behaviors is doing experiential work that helps us integrate a new way of being in the world. So while I'm using clinical type of skills with my training with experiential work, it's definitely not a therapeutic or clinical retreat. It's really, I keep saying this to our team, like, it's the retreat that I would want to go on. So selfishly.
That you'd want to go on right now?
Yeah.
Got it.
Or even if in a different stage, but yeah.
It's not so much as coming from someone who's necessarily struggling tremendously, more, hey, come nurture yourself for a weekend.
It's because I think that there are spaces that are already doing a really good job of treating more intense things. There's less spaces, especially as somebody who may keep kosher or somebody who comes from an Orthodox background, where women can just focus on their personal growth for a week and do activities that we might not normally be exposed to.
Right.
The use of cold plunge, I feel like, is, while it's, in my mind, it's everywhere, everybody knows about it, everybody's doing it now, it's so cool, how many people might not have the opportunity to, and we get to present that.
Well, when we do it at the Adama, most people have never done it before.
Right.
So while it's out there, yeah, it's compared to other activities, people are more likely to post about that on Instagram.
Yes. It's very Instagrammable. Yeah.
Right.
The other like somatic movement, or even having just a gentle yoga practice in the morning, like starting to give some of these tools that have worked in my life that I really love doing, but that maybe even with cold plunge, like being pregnant, I don't try to stress my body more. So I haven't been cold plunging as regular. So I'm actually looking forward, like I'm going to participate as long as it feels right for where I'm at in my body. And like, oh, that'd be great. Get back into a little bit of a cold plunge routine if it's the right thing for me. And I think that's the approach that we have, is like getting back in touch with our intuition is also a very feminine quality. Like a lot of women are taught not to trust or listen to what's right for them, whether it be through medical care or family of origin or religious trauma or other types of trauma. The goal is to take choices and go and do something that's challenging, but from a place of, this is what I know is right for me. So a lot of the participants like that would be appropriate for this are the ones that are trying to get back in touch with, I know what's working, but I'm not taking the action. I know something's not right, but I don't know what's not right. I want to get back into or start reconnecting with myself in an authentic way. And as a female, part of being connected to myself in an authentic way is embracing that feminine energy. We also, masculine energy is just more rewarded in our culture, unfortunately, for the women's side of things. And so trying to balance out both that feminine and masculine energy for these.
You're saying masculine energy, even amongst women, is more rewarded.
Very.
Right.
Yeah.
They're being productive, they're doing something.
Achievement-based,
yes.
Purpose, like if I'm not giving, even I think that we have a misconstrued idea of nurturing and caretaking for women, that it should be coming from a place of I've received, my cup is full, and then I flow over into my family. And there are a lot of women who are just giving from a cup that's never getting filled, either because they don't know how to receive care or help, or it's never been safe to ask for what they need, or because they're unable to fill up their cup because of that feeling that I'm going to feel guilty. If I do something for myself, I'm not allowed to, because then it's at the expense of my kids. When really, when women prioritize themselves, they're filling up so that they can then prioritize others in the way that they deserve.
Right. Yeah, I think like from the male side of that, this was an observation I had on plant medicine, is that, there's so much love I can pour into my kids, but it's rather limited, both in terms of time and in terms of energy, right? Women, I don't know physically how this is possible, but women can hold a child longer than a man could. Have you noticed this?
Yeah.
You've noticed this?
Yeah.
Yes. It's crazy. I'm like twice the size of my wife. She can hold babies for longer than I could. Anyway, so...
What do you think that is?
I think that women naturally have more energy for children than men do. And okay, we're doing something together, great.
Right.
But if men feel very useless when they're not doing something, and the doing can't feel like we're lying down next to each other and I'm sure it's giving you, a lot of comfort. No, I have to be, what am I doing? What am I teaching you? What am I showing you?
What am I giving? What am I,
yes.
Yeah.
Where's it going towards? What is the purpose of this activity?
Right.
So I think that naturally women have more energy for that. And I think that it's probably meant to be that way. But so like I was saying, in terms of energy, in terms of love, there's only so much love I can pour into my kids. But if I pour love into my wife, that love will get, multiplied by thousands and thousands. And I found that consistently, is that when things are good between us, then she has much more energy, and no, it's more energy. She always has energy for the kids, but it's more like much more positivity with the children. So it's a much more useful several hours to take my wife out on a nice date than it is to spend those several hours with my children, hoping I can give them love. Like I'll probably miss the mark there, but if she's filled up, she won't miss the mark. So it's consistent with what you're saying about giving from an overflowing cup.
What's interesting about the holding thing is that women get, and being close physically to your child gives you a packet. Well, I can backtrack. Hormonally, when a woman gives birth, she gets a package of hormones that lasts in her system for 7 years. And that package of hormones basically makes her obsessed and completely focused only on the child. So this is where we see a lot of marriages suffer because either the woman doesn't understand that, the husband doesn't understand that, or both. And it's very hard to break through this, like when we talk about mama bear. The hormones are designed so that the child's survival is guaranteed. Around 7, you'll notice there's a developmental change for children. They're starting to be able to do for themselves more than in the ages below that. And so it's designed for survival. So that's one. And so with that hormone package, what happens is being close to my child gives me hormonally and chemically a lot of rewarding chemicals to keep me bonded to the child. So a woman can hold a child longer, you're right. Scientifically, you're right. Because what the reward system that's happening, she's actually decreasing the amount of pain that she feels while she's close to the kid.
Interesting.
This is also something that's true for childbirth and natural labor, is that there's a reduction in pain with the increase of oxytocin and other chemicals. And so a woman is getting rewarded for caring for her children to keep her invested in caring for her children. It's because then there's more likelihood that the child will survive. Whereas men don't get that. Unfortunately, you guys don't get the hormones we get. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure yet. And so what happens...
Let's just say fortunately it's only one of us getting it.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's somebody who can be the more of this... if we're talking about feminine and masculine energy is compared to water. Masculine energy is compared to earth. So there is a benefit in men not getting some of the hormones women get because you guys, get to sit there like a rock while we're a raging sea. You never know. The problem is when the raging sea wears down the rock. That creates some problems in marriages. But if we're talking about
would that be another term for that? Be a man being emasculated?
Yeah, or the woman not knowing how to take responsibility for the fact that I'm emotional. This is another thing about femininity and womanhood, is that we see emotions as a liability instead of an asset. And so we're not taught how to interact with our emotions in a way that is responsible and has accountability. And I think that men also can be socialized to see women's emotions as a problem instead of as an asset and a communication of something that a man might not be able to tune into. So the woman feels dismissed or invalidated or gaslit. The emotions rage or rise and end up trying to destroy the rock in order to get my needs met, but then nobody comes out alive. Right. So it's definitely on both to be able to say, like, I can hold this space for you in the chaos of emotion that you might be going through, especially, again, I'm very focused on the pregnancy postpartum because it's where my whole focus is right now. It's impossible to expect that a woman will be able to stay emotionally regulated postpartum. But a lot of husbands aren't properly prepared for what that actually looks like or what that means or how steady they might need to be for their wife to be able to come out of that okay. And
right. How does... So what do I need to know? Because we've had 3 kids, and my wife often talks about one of them that I wasn't like a period in our marriage where I got a grade F.
You didn't make the mark. I think that what's important to know is that if we could control the amount of intensity that we were feeling, we would want to. That we're powerless in that moment over what's happening for us, and that it doesn't, just as much as it's unpleasant for you to possibly be interacting with us if we're overly unable to regulate. And I think that can look a lot of different ways for women, like whether that's crying, whether that's anger, whether that's frustration, whether that's expressing dissatisfaction in our husbands because we just don't know where else to put our energy.
Right. So what is going on that those emotions are intense?
So it's depending on the period of time postpartum. The first week is when, for a woman, her hormones are changing as the milk comes in. And that actually creates a dip in her oxytocin levels and an increase in, I'm going to forget the name. I want to say it's not Pitocin, it's another one. It'll come back to me. And what happens is that creates depression. So that's a natural dip in the cycle, and that's where we talk about normal baby blues. And what then happens is every time, if a woman's breastfeeding or not, her body is going through cycles of changes, trying to regulate the hormone intensity increases and decreases. Because what it's doing is it's trying to basically come back to normal. It's creating the uterus back down to a normal size. It's creating awareness and attention that a woman usually doesn't have. The sound of a baby's cry actually creates chemicals in the brain that make a woman more responsive, which could also be anxiety, right?
Oh,
because
understood.
arousal, it makes them feel aroused, not aroused in a sexual way,
Yes.
aroused in a something's wrong,
Yes.
which can feel like everything's wrong, right? And so then the baby's crying and it feels like the world is falling apart. And so my emotional reactions aren't matching what's happening for a man, which is that it's fine, babe, the baby's crying. So men, I think, can accidentally invalidate the intensity of what a woman's really feeling, and a woman can feel like, I don't know how to explain to you or express exactly how powerless I feel over the highs and lows of what's going on
Right.
for
I'm
me.
not choosing this either.
Yeah.
Understood.
And so it creates a separation instead of like both of us are really lost here and we need each other. It becomes like, well, if you were different or if you were different, then we'd be okay, which I think in any relationship causes
So what's the way out for some of these dynamics? You know, I had someone here who said that an unhealthy female goes towards their masculine. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say unhealthy female. A female in an unhealthy relationship, let's say, goes towards their masculine. And a male in an unhealthy relationship goes towards his little boy. You know, so becomes like a child.
Yep.
Right? Then now the mom has 4 kids instead of 3.
Yes.
You know? So what is would you agree? You would agree with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with it. I might tweak it a little bit, but I wouldn't disagree.
You might tweak it in what way?
I would say an unsafe woman goes towards her masculine.
Okay, fine.
And I mean safety not necessarily in the relationship. A woman who doesn't feel safe and secure with both sides of those parts of herself.
Right. Or just safe and secure that what she needs, her needs are going to be met, let's say. So she's going to.
And so this goes back to, and then the emasculation. And I think men definitely go towards their little boy.
So then, you watered down our, clearly it was a male who delivered the other one. Okay. So, right. So what's the way out of that? Meaning when that starts happening, that dynamic starts playing out, what's the way out?
That's a very good question, Ellie, because I think that it assumes that there are 2 parties that are willing to take responsibility for their energies. A woman who's going towards her masculine, and this is most of my life I trended towards a more masculine energy. I'm very achievement-based, perfectionistic. The more I do, the more value I have. And what happens is that having any rest, having any needs, asking other people to help me feels shameful or wrong, or like I'm not going to have as much worth or value in the world. And so I'm denying this part of my femininity, and I make it so that I'm going to attract a partner who can't give me those things. And then I'm going to feel frustrated with my partner because they're not giving me that, but I've also made it impossible for them to give me that because I'm not, again, secure or safe with my own feminine needs. So one side of that coin is the woman who's able to say, you know, I'm responsible for setting up that I've never given you space to step up as a man. My husband, my poor husband, I'm dramatic. We're very happily married. But one of the things that I noticed I would do is anytime we would go on date night, I would just automatically get in the driver's seat. He had his work truck. We typically would take my car, so it was just automatic. On accident, I would just always go to the driver's seat. And one date night, I was like, I just want you to know from now on, you're going to drive on our date nights, because I just noticed that I'm stepping into, like, it's a controlling sort of thing. And he was like, really? It's like, is it that big of a deal? Like, does it really mean that much? And I'm like, it's less about the fact that I'm driving or not driving, and more about me letting you have space to take care of me. And it's just a metaphor for I'm going to step back and let him be the one to get into the driver's seat of the car and drive us there, instead of me being the one to always kind of have control over the drive on date nights.
Yeah. I mean, in my relationship, my wife always planned the dates for a long time. And the reason,
we just went through this.
Right, the stated reason was that, prior to getting married, she was an event planner, and her passions are food, and her passions are hotels and restaurants, and this is what she knows. And if any of her friends want to know just the right restaurant for the occasion, she knows the spot.
Yeah.
And we just kind of went along with it for a while, and date night sucked too many times.
Yep.
And at some point I said, I'm going to start planning once in a while, than always.
Yeah.
And I found that it works kind of better.
Yep.
And I'll give a tip for anyone. So it's a great tip. So if you have no idea where to go, so you just tell your wife like this, and you say, guess where we're going tonight?
Oh, yeah.
And she says, oh, that new restaurant that just opened up? And you say, yeah, how'd you know?
Yeah.
And then you've planned it officially, like it still has that energy of you planning it, but the idea came from her.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Just in case you run out of ideas. No, but it's true. It's true.
It is true.
Consistently, there's been, and it wasn't like my wife, it wasn't like she let it go so easily, because we were both holding on to that kind of idea and role. And for her was, hey, we're going out to date night. That doesn't happen all the time. Like, I want to make sure it's perfect. I don't want to make sure it's done right. So it took a little bit of time, but I think that the way I've worded it to her and to myself is that when she plans date night, it's coming from fear. It's, what if he doesn't do it right?
Right.
And when I plan date night, it's coming from love.
Right.
Because I'm not so afraid for date night not to work. It's not that. It's just for me wanting to share something. Yeah. And I'll plan, and I have different ideas, and it actually it's a very good space for that to happen. And I found a big difference between me planning date night and her planning date night. Because one, like, just to add on to the
giving and receiving dynamic.
Yeah.
It's definitely an unconscious thing. Like I said, we're just, our hustle culture, society, achievement, like what it looks like out in the world, is that masculine energy of doing is definitely much more, you get more positive feedback from it than, unfortunately, a stay-at-home mom. I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Very many people assume that a mom is doing nothing.
I know.
Remember when my wife has very difficult pregnancies. So with her first, and she's busy, she likes to be busy and, do different things. And she was just home like day after day, lights off, she's like, it's the first pregnancy. She's like, what is going on? And I got home from work one day and she says, I just lied here all day. I didn't do anything. I was like, you didn't do anything. You probably made a kidney today.
Right.
You did a lot. You just didn't.
Right. And it's something that most women struggle with. Even me being very intentional and conscious about that, I have it all the time where I'm like, I came down with that terrible flu that everybody had. Mm-hmm. I was sick for 3 weeks. I'm still on my last week of this week 4 of still recovering. I'm still a little bit congested and I haven't been to the gym at all. And I'm so frustrated with I have to rest. I'm not happy about resting to heal. I feel, I can't just go be and make in the world and be productive. And again, that's a much more masculine energy. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, it's not a judgmental thing. It's just not balanced for me to always feel like I have to be going all the time in order to be okay. And my husband is so good about being you're making a whole kid. I think it's fine. And I've gotten much better at allowing myself the space that I need in order to have the energy to be productive in the world while still receiving my needs. But I think it comes up for any woman, somebody who's worked on it or not, that how do I not feel shameful about that feminine energy and what it actually requires, which is this quiet, sometimes that like going inside in a, not isolated, but in a very private way to grow. Another analogy that I really like for thinking of that is like a plant, right? You have soil, and the seed gets put in the soil and then is able to grow leaves or grow fruit or grow flowers. And that the feminine energy of that dynamic is the soil. It's not the seed. It's not the leaves. It's the soil in
like
which
Mother Earth, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if we think about soil, it's dark. It's a little bit cold. It's not the thing that's appreciated about what's happening in that seed-soil relationship. What gets appreciated is the flower that is created, but it can't happen without the soil. And so sometimes there is this invisibility to the feminine energy that I think is scary for a lot of women, because if I'm not seen, I might not be valued. But we have to see ourselves for what we're actually offering. What I'm actually doing when I rest for the last 4 weeks instead of pushing myself to the gym is allowing my body to create a life, but also like honoring what I might need at that time. Women are very cyclical, again, going back to that idea of water, also just with the cycles of our hormones and menstruation, not even pregnancy. There's cycles in which we go through that sometimes we actually have more energy for achieving, and other times we don't. And when we try to fight our cycles, we feel crazy, or we invalidate our emotions in order to justify operating in the world in a more masculine way. And that's a form of self-abandonment and self-betrayal. So there's always, I feel like, this catch-22 of I'm balancing my feminine while still achieving in a masculine way.
Can a woman initiate that process? Because from the woman's standpoint, they're saying, okay, I'll step into my feminine, right? If there's a driver driving the driver's seat, right? Yeah. Meaning if you got out of the driver's seat without your husband getting into the driver's seat, and we'll talk for a second about whether that's masculine to be told to get in the driver's seat, right? But if you get out of the driver's seat and he doesn't get in, then you're not going anywhere, right? So is the woman empowered in that dynamic to change what's going on?
Yeah, I think by expressing in that compassionate and nurturing way about what it would mean to me to have that done for me. And that's the next thing about feminine energy, is it's vulnerable and compassionate. And so to say, like, it feels really good when you take care of me in this way. And this is what, like, I didn't say it in a way like, I'm not driving anymore, you're driving from now on.
Right.
Get your ass in the seat, you know? Like, I said it from a place of like, this is something that I think that I'm doing in our relationship that I want to work on for myself, and it feels so good for me when you take care of me in this way.
Right. So I guess what you're saying is asking a question where the response can be no.
Right.
Meaning to put it out in that vulnerable way.
Right. And also men in the masculine energy, like you were talking about with your kids, want to know what I can do to make the situation happen. So if I'm empowering my husband to know this is exactly what makes me happy, I mean, there are situations where obviously there's more complex things going on, but in a typical situation, a man's going to want to make his wife happy when she tells him exactly what she needs in order to feel happy in that moment. And I don't mean happy in like, I need a new house for me to want to have more kids with you. Those are ultimatums and control, and again, coming from more fear.
Right. That's not asking a question where the answer could be no.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Instead of expressing like how good it feels for me when you do this for me, and I want more of that connection with you.
Right.
It's a loving offering that I'm offering you the opportunity to show up in your masculine with me, and I'm making space by embracing my feminine.
Right. And if the answer is no, I'm not going to try to control.
No, yeah.
The outcome.
There's a difference between requests and demands.
Right, exactly. I think of my kids. My oldest grabbed the toy from one of the young kids, and I said, "Why'd you grab it?" He said, "I asked him, and he didn't give it to me." I said, "But that's not called asking, right?"
Yeah.
Right. If it's an ask, then the answer can be no. Otherwise, it's not an ask.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so the woman could initiate the process.
Yeah.
Right. The man Right. I guess the man can ask the same question because the man can initiate the process also, but if the woman doesn't step aside and then it turns into that kind of
Power struggle.
right.
Yeah. Those are never fun in relationships.
Right.
And I think when men
So
initiate,
yeah.
the where it can go in a hiccup is that they're initiating without acknowledging the emotional component. Right? This goes
Yes.
back into like our strengths and weaknesses as men and women. Women, when in a healthy space, are much more tuned into emotions. It's just the way our brain works. It's literally chemically wired into our brain to notice relationship and emotional cues way more quickly and way more readily than men.
Okay.
So what a woman might notice in 10 seconds, a man would never notice about the emotional climate of a situation. They're very intuitive men. They're very emotionally connected men. It's not to invalidate the capacity for men's emotional awareness. It's just not, it's something that has to be consciously worked on instead of just intuitively given. I think women can lose touch with that also. I think that's also the purpose of like coming back to these spaces where women are working together, as it gives us more permission to go back into our intuitive emotional awareness and intelligence. That being said, a man will say, we could use the same scenario of, I'm going to start driving on date night, and say it just, and mean nothing by that. Just that statement, mean nothing by it. It has no depth of emotion underneath that. And his wife might feel, I know in my situation, I'd be like, okay, what, you don't like my driving? You know, there's that little girl or that vulnerability of like, but I don't understand why. Like, I want to know the emotional behind what your decision is because I want to connect with you. So while a man is doing action that is very masculine and healthy and taking initiative without acknowledging the emotional component of like, I would really like to show up for you in this way from love, then the woman can be left feeling like, I don't understand what happened. Maybe he doesn't like my driving. Maybe, and again, that's, as a female, if that comes up, I have to work on my insecurity. Or if I feel like, but you don't drive that good. Or I don't like when you drive because you're on your phone, or these types of things, we can also take away a man's effort to step into his...
Right. So what would be a way for a man to say that while addressing the emotions underneath?
Yeah,
using the car example.
I would like to drive on date night tonight because I feel good when you get to sit and I get to be the one doing the work. I mean, with words that make sense, but like, I want to take my lady out.
But explain the reason why that way it's not misinterpreted in some way.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay, you reacted earlier when I spoke about, when I used the word power struggle. It's like, hey, that's not good. So you want to say more about what?
I think power struggles in general indicate a lack of awareness of our connected humanity. So power struggle in general, whenever, and again, I'm just as vulnerable as the next person to get into a power struggle. But typically power struggles we're polarized against each other, forgetting that as humans, there's probably a common bond here. And so for us to go from being in a power struggle to being bonded, I have to drop into vulnerability. And I think a lot of people struggle with that type of vulnerability that it takes to not be in competition with each other or in a one up, one down from each other, which are typically create power struggles or polarizing each other from being able to be connected.
Right. So if there's obviously if there's children or a family together, then the commonality is there, but power struggles still happen all the time, even in those formats. So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that in order to reach a state where we're kind of on opposite ends of the table, someone has to forget about what's shared.
Yeah.
The way out of that is
coming back to the vulnerability. I'll say it from this perspective too, just because it applies to the female relationship dynamic. Mm-hmm. Most females are not taught that I can get a lot of strength from relationship with women. In fact, I know more women, there are women out there who are like women's women. They want to hang out with women and they want to be they love schmoozing with women. They love women. I happen to be interacting with and come from a place where I used to feel like the last person I wanted to talk to or interact with was a woman. Because of
But
how...
the cattiness, the competition?
Cattiness, competition, not feeling if I was vulnerable that I was going to be shamed, or it gave them a one-up on me instead of feeling like it created connection. And I remember I had just a friend even found out it was like a detailed information about what I got paid on something, right? And all of a sudden I felt this shift in our energy between it. It was something we were talking about in conversation. I just spoke about money and something that triggered something for her. And all of a sudden I could feel she was like separate from me or polarized from me, and that it meant something about her, and that now there was this competition going on. And I was like, oh, I don't remember signing up for this race. Like, I didn't mean to do that. And so a lot of times female relationships for me were about power struggles. And male relationships, it was so much easier because, frankly, like, there was no competition going on. There was no needing to be the best one in the room. I mean, I've definitely experienced misogyny, which is a different form of power struggle than what I'm referring to. But it's not. It was much more comfortable to be in spaces around men than spaces around women, because I knew I wasn't going to say something that they would suddenly want to harm me for. And again, This is my own trauma with women. This is my own. I think there are women that have the opposite or different experiences. But
right, you were getting to this point from saying how, I guess, you or others may not see a possibility of getting energy from being with other women.
Which I think, and I talk about this with women who struggle with women, my clients or friends or this type of thing, is that that's the perfect person to go to a women's retreat. Right? Like, obviously, like the thing that I don't want to do is probably the thing that's going to bring me to my greatest awareness of myself in most circumstances. And the way that I healed relationships with women was getting closer and getting curious about what was really going on for me around women. What was I really afraid of feeling? What was I really afraid of experiencing? Why did I not think that I could take care of or protect myself and my feminine energy, even if another woman was struggling with her feminine energy?
Right.
And that's what I mean about forgetting the shared humanity that happens in power struggles. Is I used to play into the power struggle by believing that maybe there was something, I'm not good enough, or I'm this, or I'm that, whatever negative thing, and all of a sudden we're against each other, and I should have never mentioned money, or I should have never, I mean, between women it could be as little as like, I should have never worn this dress that somebody thinks I look nice in.
Right. And
feeling shame for just presenting and not realizing that you were going to possibly create a negative reaction from another woman in the room. And it's a very uncomfortable place to be in. And so the power struggle there that I had to work on for myself was understanding that somebody else's reaction to me didn't separate us as humans. It's a place where I could have more compassion for what they might be going through, and compassion for myself, that I wasn't given the safety to be a woman in a healthy way until I started learning some of these things. And that's the opposite of being polarized, is being connected.
So this is, it's like some of the intention behind the retreat is to create spaces like this on purpose.
On purpose. Uncomfortable spaces.
Right. Uncomfortable spaces, but safe spaces. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what we try to do at our retreats, is a space of safety with uncomfortability, like that combination.
And I think too, like, just the opportunity for a woman to get away and not be responsible for anyone else is a big thing. I mean, the staff at the women's retreat we're obviously very responsible for our participants, but I want participants to get the feeling that they can come and just be, which...
Right, and don't be afraid that you won't take taken care of. It's not a little boy.
Yep.
It's a woman in her masculine.
Yes. No little boys, just a bunch of other ladies. But that's the beauty of bringing people together. I learned so much about myself from interactions with others. And same with the women who are participants in this women's retreat, is that you're going to learn more about yourself from the relationship that you see happening with each other. So I know from doing these types of work personally and then guiding them professionally, is like, there'll be the woman who really wants to be there for somebody else in caretaking, and then the woman who's like please don't come too close to me because it's scary. And they're going to trigger each other, and it's going to be beautiful, and they'll get to find harmony in the ways that they used to possibly be too extreme in, right? And so we learn how to step in towards each other in a safe, healing way when we're confronted with other people who, A, we can't control, and B, are perfectly put into our lives to trigger our shit.
Right.
So,
yeah, when I look at the retreats we do, the brotherhood, you know, a term that Mayor, who I, co-facilitate the retreat with, use all the time, is the medicine of brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the most powerful medicine that's being offered there. Yes, you know, the breath works and the cold plunges and the sweat lodges and psychodrama, whatever else we're doing is great, and they are. But the longest term change that I see are the relationships that are formed from the group which comes together. Yeah.
And I think the difference between doing a women's retreat versus, like, I've facilitated many women's group intensives, is that we're coming specifically for the agenda of how do I step into or heal the feminine or the female topics that are exclusive to my womanhood, whereas like a general group intensive, a therapy intensive might be about more specific. Again, it's dealing with it, but it's more like I'm coming in to work on, let's say, an eating disorder or eating disorder or sex addiction or love addiction. This is about embracing the energy of a divine feminine in order to live a life where I feel like more aligned and in integrity with what my soul needs to feel good in the world and to create in the world a different thing. So one of the things about women and the power of women is that it's interesting. There's a lot of like spiritual concepts about this, that the world won't elevate and change until the feminine energy is healed. Because of this concept, like I was talking about in the beginning, that women are portals from the supernatural to the natural world. So because our energy is that portal, if there is competition with women, if women's voices are belittled, if women are made to feel small, the world won't change and elevate towards the good. And I think in Jewish principles, you could talk about that, like for the concept of Mashiach coming, but there's many different spiritual beliefs that all say the same thing about feminine energy being the portal towards change for a higher level of consciousness. And so I also believe there's a bigger purpose in me healing, for me in my own healing of my feminine energy, and doing retreats like this is like, okay, let's go to the next level. Let's not disempower women and not have women disempower themselves out of just a lack of opportunity, because typically once we know better, we do want to do better.
Right. It's interesting because my wife repeatedly, like through work that she's engaged in, the message over and over for her was like women's only retreats, women's only circles, women's only ceremonies, like over and over, and to be a part of that. Like she's seen that as something that's very important, not just for herself, but for the larger world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same way in men's spaces. Well, I have respect for the work that could and should and is done in group settings. There's something completely different that happens in a men's only space or a women's only space.
Yeah.
In a lot of men's healing, if women will never see this, because once one is there, it changes the whole dynamic.
Yep.
So they'd have to see it through video or something, video or wear a costume. Is the like sometimes just the sheer rage that needs to be expressed and needs to be contained, by others. And without, it's not the only element of it, but it's an important element of it.
It is. It's. I'm smiling as you say this because it's one of the big things for women also.
Is what?
Anger, rage.
Right.
The space to safely express without it being seen as problematic for the status quo, for a woman to be angry.
Right. For men, it could be scary. It's a little different, right? Right. Sure. Women may be called hysterical.
Right.
Right.
Right. So men typically are
men may be
considered intimidating or violent, or it's not safe for you to express the actual anger that you're feeling, because also, again, if we're going back to biology, which I'm always going back to biology. Right. Men don't perceive themselves as a different size than the woman that they're angry around. So what happens for a woman in her brain is when a man is angry, this is a person that I know in the back of my consciousness that is stronger than me, can overpower me and can harm me. Women are around a man, we have an intuition or a part of our brain that's telling us that this person can overpower me at any time. Out of survival instincts, this is a man around an elephant probably feels that way, right? But women around men can feel that way. And so when a man is angry, the amount of intimidation that a woman feels it's like their limbic system snaps to right away and says, I'm not safe, just because they know that the man can be overpowering towards them. And men are, obviously a male's anger is appropriate when appropriate and not harmful and all that, he can express it in that way and a woman still have that reaction. And I think that's really hard for men because then they're put in a position of like shame for feeling angry, but they're not noticing that like it's just this instinct for a woman to feel fearful around a man's anger because of knowing that he can always overpower her. So it's very vulnerable for women to be around a man's anger because of that knowledge. And so men have to hold back or women have to then defend and a man doesn't get heard. And also, so for women, if we express anger, a man is like not intimidated. I mean, some men are because they've been traumatized by women. Women abusing men is obviously something that happens, but men don't have this biological response of this person can overpower me, is stronger than me, and can harm me. So when a woman gets angry, it's not as threatening for a man as it is for a woman, an adult woman. An adult woman getting angry at a male child, a boy, is that same level of scary.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
Yep.
On both ends of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for a woman, the anger is that I will never express myself in a way that I'm going to get heard and validated for how actually angry I feel. Because nobody's intimidated, nobody's hearing me, nobody's intimidated, I'm not affecting change. Anger informs us that our boundary has been violated and that we need to make a change, healthy anger. Rage is more about just harming everybody in our path because we're uncontained with an anger that's probably not ours, carried anger or unprocessed abuse or unresolved betrayal. There's lots of reasons why we go into rage. But anger is a healthy emotion that says my boundaries have been violated. I get angry and I can restore my boundary system. And a lot of women don't feel like they're given the power to have a boundary system that is going to be respected. And so I can get as angry as I want. I'm still going to be invalidated or treated like my voice doesn't matter.
Right.
And I think that's where when you see uprising of a woman's voice about a very controversial topic or a very painful or difficult topic, there's always that counter side that's trying to kind of like quiet it down.
From women, from men, from both?
From both. Women invalidate other women just as much as men invalidate other women. Yeah.
And you're saying, and what's the reason for that? What's the reason that happens?
The reason for that dynamic is because if women actually were able to establish the boundaries, there might be changes, very positive changes that could happen that will disrupt a system that's been a certain way for a long time. Again, this goes through that. Women transform something. They receive something, they change it, it transforms. So if a woman, again, even in medical, like I see this most for medical trauma with my female clients is that they've gone to doctor after doctor after doctor reporting a symptom and the doctors never hear them. They go into a doctor and yell at him and they put her on antidepressants.
Understood.
And so it's just this quieting of the voice over and over again when I'm trying to speak up for a boundary and say that something's not okay and we need to do something about this, whether it's me personally or societally. And so it's much easier to say, no, there's nothing wrong. We can't figure out what's wrong. It's your emotions are the problem or your anger is the problem, but the anger is communicating there's something not right. And so
Understood. That makes a lot of sense. It's actually helpful that we're talking about this because, especially as it relates to the retreat, because this was not my understanding of what the retreat was.
It's not just going to be a bunch of angry women the whole time.
No, nothing to do with anger. No,
I'm joking.
I'm not talking about anger. What I'm talking about is that it's not for, because if I see a retreat led by you, right, so then I'm assuming therapy, I'm assuming disorder, I'm assuming treatment, But you're saying, no, this isn't about that. This is about the feminine.
Yeah.
And this is about nurturing the feminine and understanding our role in the world and women supporting women and creating a community of women.
Right.
I think it's important that we're doing this because it gives a much better understanding
Yeah.
of what it is that's actually being offered
Yeah.
during this weekend.
I know for me, I want to have relationships with women where we talk about more than, I love talking about shachels and jewelry and clothes with women, don't get me wrong. But when I feel the most in my feminine is when I'm talking about the experience of womanhood in a vulnerable and authentic way. Now, that's where I really feel my most feminine. It's not the stuff, it's not the surface level, it's not the superficial, it's not the, all of these things are part of womanhood, cooking and getting ready and getting dressed, and motherhood and childcare. This is all dynamics of what we're doing in our world as a woman, but it's not our essence of who we are as women. And that's what I want the retreat to be more focused on, is what's the essence of that feminine womanhood, and where can I move into that in a way that aligns with what's actually true, that balance, because all of us are trying to balance the energy of our feminine and masculine in some way.
There's a quality to those superficial conversations, that feel status driven. Is that okay?
Sure.
Is that okay with you for me to describe it that way? You agree with that?
Yeah, and it goes back into polarizing. Do I have a nice enough whatever?
So what is that about? What's the search for? What is there some biological need that's being met or sought after with the?
It could be. I don't, off the top of my head, I'm like, that doesn't make sense for a woman, because typically where women thrive is in relationship and in groups and in relationship. We typically, what's going on is that a man would go out to hunt, women stay home and raise as a group, the groups of the children, and cook and maintain like a home, and that we were doing that in community with each other. So if it's status driven, that doesn't fit with where women actually thrive.
Right.
In my mind, this goes back to this competitive, polarizing. If we can make women out to want status more than the other, or get value from a man more than the other, then we're keeping them distracted from how much they could actually be doing towards healing and growing in the world. To me, it's like it's a way to stay distracted from what I could actually be focused on, which is how to bring more love, or bring more goodness, or bring more nurturing, or bring more healing.
Right. I'm thinking, like, for men, a lot of that is very common, right? The one of the competition, but some of that is, men
it's a lot biological too.
Yeah, men are competing for power. They're competing for influence. Yep. They're competing for the woman.
Yep.
Right. Right. Women, it's maybe not thought of that way, but I've wondered about that. Why this. It feels to me like a lot of it is status driven.
Yeah.
Hey, can I one up the other person? Could that be driven by the search for the best mate? I mean, even though someone's married, there can still be ideas.
Yeah.
Or programming that's still kind of live with us.
It's, again, I go back to, that's not really a woman in her healthy feminine energy.
Will not be status driven.
Will not be status driven. Okay,
so your response says that that's not a truly feminine thing. That's the feminine buying into a lie. Buying into the masculine. The masculine lie.
That I need to go get the partner that's going to make me one up from the other women, like all that, like that men typically do have. And I don't think men seek partners always to feel one up. I think that's unhealthy masculine also. I think really if we're talking about healthy partner seeking behavior, it's about who do I feel complements me. Both, we have innate biological things. We're going to be more attracted to the smell of another person who has opposite genetics than us, so that there's genetic diversity. We're going to we typically look at body proportions, or why some people are attracted to certain body proportions, because of the likelihood of survival of a baby together. There's just a lot that's going on that is not conscious. So attraction is typically with mate seeking, it's from male to female, because men have the testosterone, and that testosterone is actually what gives you the drive towards seeking. Women are there to receive. So technically, and I tell this to people who date all the time, my single clients that are dating, I'm like, your job isn't to try to get somebody to be attracted to you. Your job is to find out, am I attracted to them?
Right. You're not selling, you're buying.
Which I think for men, that's also important to look at also in dating. Once you get married, it's complete opposite. It's what can I do for my partner and how can I be of loving service to this person who I've committed my life to. These are ideals.
Right.
Not impossible ideals, but I think I hear a lot of stories of people that feel like they're missing that in their relationship. And so part of avoiding getting into relationships where I don't feel that way is in the beginning looking at what is this person showing me about them that makes it that I would want to give myself to them in such an intimate way. I think women are also taught that the most valuable thing you can give a man is sex.
Right.
Right. So if he's gonna want to be with you and want to pick you if you give him sex right off the bat, which is counterintuitive to actual bonding, because women bond through intimate contact and orgasm, and men bond through commitment. So when men have sex early on in a relationship, without already making a level of commitment to the female, they don't have the level of bonding that the female has towards the man. And women then get confused. Why isn't I gave him the most special, important thing about me, and he doesn't want me? I must not have value. But I'm not seeing that my value actually comes from him being able to pursue and feel like he's earned the right to be with me. Because then he's going to commit to being with me, and that's going to bring the oxytocin that I'll feel once I orgasm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very interesting.
So that's where it's also like mate-seeking behavior. For a woman to be status-driven is the opposite of how mating actually works in a healthy way, in a healthy dynamic. Because if I'm status-driven and seeking the man, I'm trying to get him to commit to me without him doing the effort or the work. And again, this sounds kind of sexist whenever I say it out loud, but it's just biological. Yeah. With the chemicals that happen.
If there wasn't a difference between men and women, there wouldn't be men and women. I mean, it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think the status for women is much more about that unhealthy masculine or the wounded feminine. That if I'm not better than other women, I have no voice. I'm not special. I'm not going to be cared for.
Right.
Nobody's going to see me. I'm not going to matter in the world.
Right. For men, essentially, the only option is achievement. The only option is success. The only option is, and it doesn't have to be financial, but if a man is not producing, contributing, giving, he's viewed as useless. Like there isn't really any room for compassion or acceptance or anything else. A man has to deliver, has to produce.
Yeah. And I think women can pigeonhole men into that.
Sure, maybe, but it's the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all men, healthy or unhealthy, are searching for, maybe unhealthy, we'd say they're searching for power.
Right.
And healthy would be searching for influence.
Right.
Yeah. Influence, impact.
Yep.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. Having power is different than using power.
Sure. Yeah.
So feeling empowered, we want to have that. Women and men need empowerment, but the way women get empowered is a bit different than the way men get empowered.
Say more.
So it was, for me personally, I'm very career driven as a person. Again, that might be unhealthy masculine. It might be personality or traits, just how I am. I also am passionate and I like to create stuff. And so, and I like achievement. So I definitely have that energy of, I want to create and do and be powerful in an impactful way.
Right.
Having power is I'm doing that so that I have more influence than the other female entrepreneur next to me. I'm trying to be one up again. This goes back to the one up and one down. I think for men, it goes into if I have a certain number in my bank account, or if I have this car, or if I have this certain objectively attractive woman, then I have control of the room and I'm completely invulnerable. So the power, having power and using power. Using power is my power, it disempowers other. I'm using the power to disempower others. Having power is I'm powerful and I'm creating and growing a space where other people are allowed to have power also. It's not a threat.
Right. Right.
And you can tell me, I don't know if for men it feels different. Like if somebody else has power, if it's threatening or...
I mean, it depends. There was a time where I was more insecure, where if my identity was attached to something specifically, something specific, so where there was a period of time my identity was very attached to money, then someone else having more could threaten that in some way, could threaten my identity, right? Meaning my identity in this space is that I have the most, or I'm able to do the most, whatever it is, right? If it's attached in any way to that, then someone else having it could feel threatening. But I think that even as I've worked out some of those identity attachments and fears around the loss of control or the loss of identity, specifically attached to that, but I'm sure it applies to anything, I haven't seen any relaxation around a desire for influence,
Right.
and the ability to impact things. That continues. If not, if anything, it gets stronger. One of the stories I love is the story of Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who asked his students on Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, he said, "Can you bring any chametz from the town?" And obviously, the burning of the chametz already taken place, so it was difficult to find any, and they went out and looked and came back after hours and hours, and him continuously saying, "No, bring it, bring it, bring it. I would like it immediately." Them coming back and saying they can't find any chametz in the whole town. Like they've looked top to bottom, there is none. And then he asked, "Okay, can you bring some, I don't know, maybe the illegal tobacco or some illegal substances?" And said, "Hey, can you bring any of those?" And within minutes, he had, his office full of all the illegal contraband that, existed at that time. And Reb Levi Yitzchak, who was known for, finding the praises around the Jewish people, like turned his gaze heavenward and said, like, "God, look at the influence you have.
Right.
Thousands of years ago, you gave instruction on Sinai, or shortly through the Torah, for these things to happen, and look, they're happening. And you have no." He said the Tsar has a police officer on every corner, and he has none of the influence. Right. The best he's been able to do is get these things to go underground.
Right.
Right. So that ability to do that, right? That ability to be able to say something and it means something, or to move people in a certain way, or create something, whatever it is, I think that's a desire in the healthy masculine, and I think will continue to be.
It's very cool because it's the same thing, that to have power, if I'm using my power, I'm just going to make people feel smaller, push them, like you said, underground. You get a black market.
Exactly.
Whereas if I am experiencing an empowered life, I'm creating a positive impact that actually can change what's happening for myself and those around me. And I encourage things to elevate instead of go down. So it's a really beautiful story.
Right. Yeah, I guess that one up, one down is the real thing. I mean, it's the question of that's the real question, right? That's where it hinges on. It doesn't hinge on whether a man wants that influence and wants the ability to do that. Of course they do. But if you find someone else does also, is that threatening to you?
Right.
Or do you say, hey, here's an opportunity for collaboration?
Right. And I think this is where I think there's a very common thing with this in women. Where if there is that need for status, or that need for being in competition with, or the fear that I'm not good enough, or the shame of I'm not going to be a valuable enough woman unless I'm like that woman in comparison, that's that power over that one up or one down sensation, instead of the fact that we are all connected to the same feminine energy, and that how I look, or what I achieve, or who I'm with doesn't actually define my value, and doesn't define how empowered I could be as a person. Okay,
so your final word about that whole status drive for higher status is that it's a woman in her masculine.
Yep.
Understood. Very, very, very interesting. Is there anything more you want to say about these dynamics? There is one more. I'm not sure if we said it, or I didn't completely catch it, but about when the power struggle ensues, when that's happening, do they, does both a man and a woman have equal ability to do something about it?
Yes, if they're with a willing partner.
Yes, if they're with a willing partner. Okay, say more.
There are times where in that power struggle, I've seen it where my wounding as a woman or my wounding as a man is so deep that I won't let the connection happen, right? So we're in this power struggle, we're in separation. And to connect again would be either the woman embracing that feminine or the male stepping into his masculine, and balancing those energies. But if one or the other takes a step forward to a partner who doesn't have the willingness or desire to also match them, there's no amount of acting that I think can change that person. There's waiting or patience or requesting that can happen, but at the end of the day, I think that we are very powerless over other people in a way.
Including a dynamic that's at play between two people?
If the other person's unwilling.
Right. I'm trying to think, like probably one of the, like the main areas of contention between my wife and I for a while in our relationship was around date night. Like that was the thing. And
I laugh only because me and my husband just had a date night, like
blow up.
not blow up. I wouldn't call it a blow up. Me saying, I need you to take more initiative and care more about date night, because when we just like we do date night every week. That's one of our things. So I think that's why it got mundane. He's running in from work. I'm finishing up dinner with the kids. Our babysitter gets there. We rush off. Oh, who planned date night? Like there wasn't enough intention around it. And so I'm more likely to just pick up that mental load and figure it out. I also am a foodie. So he doesn't care where we, I'm very particular about where we, and I have certain food aversions. Like it put me in a position of being in control of date night. And then accidentally.
Can a foodie be kosher?
Man.
A true foodie can't be kosher, but anyway.
A true foodie, there's a part of me that has had to sacrifice for my value system in order to be kosher. Because, man, I love a good oyster. It's so sad.
Oh, right. I didn't mean it about like oysters or other things. It's more in terms of kosher restaurants itself that it's sometimes hard to get the...
You know, if a foodie is kosher, you have to go in the first month or else you'll never get good food there again.
Right. I have this...
At least here in Florida.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure there's some there. But I have this dream for one of the events I'd like to do at the House of More is date night. And it's kosher, the house. So, the property's fairly large. And to have kind of individual seating, right? So everyone alone. And then there's a waiter and, so there's proper service. And kind of a level of food and presentation and ambiance that I have not seen in a kosher restaurant in South Florida.
Sign me up.
Really?
I'm first in. It was one of the,
I'll talk to your husband about it because he's planning date night from now on.
But he'll have to drive, that's for sure.
Yeah, one of the rules is only the man can book it. If the woman books it, then we know this is set for disaster. But anyway.
That's why I was laughing about the date night thing earlier too, is we just had this where I asked him to, if you could take that intentionality, it would feel so much more loving because I'm overwhelmed by trying to figure this out every Thursday. Right.
Yeah, so my wife and I got into a lock around it was like she had her, she's a foodie in every definition of the word. Mm-hmm. And she had her spots where she wanted to go. And from my standpoint, I was kind of like, okay, if you only want to go to that place, you don't want to be with, like, what does that have to do with me? So I kind of would, like, you want to go to that place, so obviously it has nothing to do with me.
You can just go. Why don't you just go without me? Go with a friend.
Exactly. So
I've heard that argument.
Right. So my 2-year-old boy would come out. Yes. Right. She would say is, if we're not doing date night every week necessarily, but if we're only doing date night every so often or whatever else it is, let's say it's only once a week. So I'm home with the kids all day. I'm doing this stuff. Like, why not take me to the place I love? Why can't you care enough about me to take me to the place? So we were caught in this. Yes. I don't even know what to call it. In this loop. This endless loop. And then eventually I said, okay, like I'm switching this up. Okay. at no point in courtship did she plan anything. Right? That's not how
Right.
this worked.
Right.
That's not how this went down. I
It's how it
planned. I told
developed.
her where to go.
Right.
I told her how to dress. She showed up, and it worked well. And
Yeah.
if we tried this, she wouldn't have liked me very much, and I would have liked her very much. So we
Right.
got to go back. Gotta bring it back. And the first time I booked something, so my thought process was, it's a restaurant and a hotel that I thought she would like. And I said, okay, I'll book like a seat at the bar and then a room in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and not tell her that we're spending the night at the hotel. I just kind of planned that. So I did that, and I booked it all, and I said, okay, Saturday night, right, be ready, dress nicely, 9 o'clock we're leaving. And she probably reminded me about 15 times that day about a new restaurant that opened up that we must go to, and that it's impossible that I planned and everything else, right? But meaning, the reason I'm going to the detail of the example is that she was not, at that point, a willing participant at all. Not even close.
Right.
But because I had already paid for the hotel and everything else, it was like I wasn't going to be worn down on the subject. Otherwise, I would have. And we ended up going, and I bungled the night anyway because we had an early flight the next day. It didn't make any sense. Like, I didn't plan things properly. So then I got mocked for not mocked, but kind of like, hey, like date night sucked. Right, kind of thing.
Right.
Not exactly, but it was kind of
Right.
like, hey,
Right.
went to the bar, went up there, then we had to rush out of the hotel, to make an early flight. Like, this wasn't thought through. This wasn't thought through at all. So now an unwilling participant who had good ammo
Yes.
as well.
Which should be very emasculating which can be very emasculating coming from.
Right, and hopefully she doesn't mind sharing this because I think this is a dynamic that many people enter. But the reason I'm saying it is that I kind of pushed through that, right, and said, okay, another night and another night and another night, and just planning, and then eventually it got to the point where I think she enjoys it. Not that she doesn't want her stuff once in a while, and she's like, hey, I'd love this restaurant or that, or I'm thinking about this thing. So I always have that list of stuff that she's interested in, but there's no question that for both of us, our best date nights have been when I plan them, and I'm like a hopeless romantic a little bit. Like, I'll sometimes go into extreme detail to plan things and work things out and everything else, and it's been better for both of us. So the reason I said is that looking back, even though it was difficult, and with someone who wasn't completely willing to let go of the reins at the beginning, there was a way for me to do it, not through anger. Anger was the worst. Anytime I tried was the worst. It had to be kind of like humor and silliness and fun and lightness, like all of that stuff. And then over time, wore her down. As David Data would say, I penetrated her with love.
Yes, exactly. But there's another aspect of that I didn't include. There's two things that we need to make a relationship work. And I was saying a willing partner, willingness. There's also desire. So I could be really willing to do stuff, but I have no desire to do it. So I could have a partner that, yeah, sure, I'll go on date night with you, but I have no desire to be there with you. That's not going to make a relationship work. I don't have desire for the situation or the person or the relationship.
Oh, that's a completely different thing, yeah.
Right. So if I'm unwilling, but I have desire, it's not going to work. So I could want to, but I'm not going to take the actions necessary to end the power struggle or to balance the relationship in a way that brings love and positivity. So I could have a desire for that, but I'm not willing to take the action. Or I could take the actions, but it's not matched by any desire. And so when I said a willing partner, I left out that part of assuming there's desire to be with the other person.
Right,
So,
I'm kind of taking that as a given.
that's why you're able to penetrate, is because while she may not have been totally willing at the beginning, she has a desire for connection with you.
Right.
And a desire for that relationship with you.
Right.
And that's why most relationships are able to get through those power struggle or those loops, is when I'm able to connect with what's our primary purpose here in this relationship. Is
right, exactly.
12-step fellowship talks about our primary purpose in this fellowship is to da-da-da-da-da. There's primary purpose of a marital relationship. And if the primary purpose is, I typically in couples therapy will have people name what their primary purpose in this relationship is. But that's something that couples can do with each other. My primary purpose of date night is to express and share love and connection and joy with you.
Right.
Okay, so then if that's not your primary purpose of date night, if it's something else, then we're not on the same page. It's not going to work. So how do
Right,
we come
exactly.
back
If it's
the
to have a
primary
meal in a certain
purpose?
restaurant, right,
Right.
then it's not going to work. Understood. Okay, yeah, I kind of took that as a given, and in our case, it's not like there weren't other areas that were bleeding over into date night. It's like date
Right.
night was kind of the space
Right.
where
That there was that tension.
right, there was that tension. It wasn't
And I also
playing out
think this
everywhere.
is where it's, I mean, in a family system too, there's just so many things that a woman is mentally responsible for. I think that's also something that's very cool about social media is all of a sudden I've heard a lot of people understanding the concept of mental load.
Yes.
And that it's just a woman is going to be thinking about the entire family system, whether that's just her and her husband,
Right.
just her and kids, her and her extended family or her sisters. They're always going to be thinking about the relational dynamic, whereas men don't carry the same mental load as
No,
women.
not even close.
Not even close.
Right, which is-
because you're very directional.
Yes.
Again, goes into testosterone versus estrogen, progesterone.
Right,
in the
and there's
brain.
also the woman worrying about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like my wife sometimes says, like, "You're not worried about this, that, or the other thing." I said, "No." She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because you are."
Yeah.
Like, if you weren't worried about that, if you weren't taking care of that, I'd be extremely
I
worried.
tell my husband that all the time. I'm like, if you get anxious about packing for the girls, I won't be. You don't want me to feel like pressured? You do it then. You feel the pressure.
Right,
Because
and that's
we
one.
are balancing energetic containments in a relationship.
Right, and that's one thing that I found also nice on date night when I'm taking that lead is I can tell my wife, "Hey, like, put the phone away. The nanny can have
Yep.
my phone number. Like, you don't have to book the restaurant. Let them know if we're running a few minutes late, which we always are. Right? Like, you don't have to do that. That's taken care of. You can put your phone away, and that mental load that you're talking about, it takes off one additional component of it.
Yeah.
So while I found the reason I'm asking the question is because I'm not a fan of like disempowered states where we
Right.
can't do anything about where we are. So from the man's standpoint, well, it's not necessarily easy. It's very difficult to change a dynamic like this, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of creativity and humor and all sorts of other things. Like I said, yeah. I'm just thinking. I'll say it. I'll say it. So my wife, like, proudly has this thing where she says she's not a fan. She's young of like being told what to do, right? It's not like not in school, not anything else. Not a fan of being told what to do, right? And I'm frankly not either.
Yeah,
So-
I was about to say, that's a good match for you.
Right. So at some point in time, something came up, and I saw like she was relating to it like that, like as if I was saying what to do, when it wasn't really that. It was an agreement we had made that was being reminded of, not
Right.
me telling what to do. So, but it was like a sticking point, and I'm like, how do I get this through to her? Like, how do I get this through
Right.
to her? So I went on Amazon and looked on t-shirts, and I found a t-shirt that said, "Don't tell me what to do." And I bought her like a couple of these shirts in different sizes, and I said, this will go well with what this would be a great shirt for you. And I found like those things, like sometimes like using humor or stuff like that can be a great way to snap out of some of these like more tense dynamics. So oftentimes women will force men into that space
Right.
where we'll do it, but get creative, get humorous, get light, get fun, get like,
I think also couples
don't tell me, like, don't force it.
Right.
Like use
Right.
the little,
tact.
what?
Tact could be part of what you
Right.
say, but I
Or
think
even
it's
the
also,
way water will penetrate things. Yeah. Like use
Yeah.
that, like find a way in, and it's not always going to be the most direct.
the other piece with that I think is important in what you're saying is we can get stuck in connection through intensity and negativity, which isn't real connection.
Right.
Right. So in couples, I see very healthy couples accidentally do this. Is that I'm craving closeness and connection with you. I don't realize it. Maybe I'm just because we're busy or this or that. I'm missing my partner. And if I create some emotional intensity between us, it's going to bring us close, but not in the closeness that I actually want to receive.
Right. Like a makeup sex kind of thing.
Yeah, makeup sex type
Got
of thing.
it.
Yeah, or like at least if we're fighting, you're talking to me.
Right.
And like you're looking at me. We have eye contact. We're
Right.
engaging. It's meeting an unmet need in an unhealthy way.
Right.
And I think a lot of couples will accidentally do that. And then if we can notice in that moment of like, wait a second, I think I just wanted you to have a conversation with me, and be able to calm down those. And that, I think that's where humor and lightness and all of that, it takes us out of the intensity seeking for connection and puts us in actual real connection, which happens in those play spaces. That's also something I think is very hard for women to move into, is being playful and spontaneous and having that, like, our own little girl be able to dance around with like flowers in our hair. That's my little girl at least wants to do. And so we feel like we have to keep the world together all the time, which is an unhealthy feminine thing. It's not true. We might be the soil for something else to grow, but it's not our responsibility to make sure the leaves are opening. It's our responsibility to hold the space for something to grow. And so we have a hard time letting go of everything's our responsibility, and I can just be and play and have lightness and humor. We can carry a lot of heaviness with a wounded feminine energy that makes it very difficult for us to enjoy ourselves, our playfulness, and our partner's playfulness. A lot of men connect through play and humor. You guys are a little bit sometimes better at it because you're just not worrying about as much.
Right.
No,
I hear that. Yeah, I'm thinking, like, a friend of mine, he said, like, in terms of date night, he said, it's like, even when planning, he said what he found worked for him well was to, like, not even let his wife know where. It's like, it just gives them one more thing to worry about. Just, what do they actually need to know? How to dress, how long it's going to be. Like, that's it.
Yep.
Right.
A general expectation.
Yes.
Right.
But where we're going, what, I don't like that place. How many people can be there? Am I going to see a friend I know? Like, take all that stuff off the table, be ready 9:00, dress casual.
I think that also is coming from a place of knowing my wife, right? I have to know her to plan that type of thing in a way that is going to not oversell her expectations or under-deliver in the date night, because sometimes that mystery is part of what creates chemistry in relationship. And this is where you were talking about, like, in a men's retreat space.
Yes.
Like, if a woman comes in, it automatically changes it. There is a mystery to masculinity and there's a mystery to femininity the same way. When a man is in the women's spaces, she's going to change. There's this unknown component, right, that we always have with each other. But that attunement to, I know what my wife would enjoy, that's not mystery. That's like being able to connect with and give her what she would want in order to be able to receive it in a way. Because I think sometimes too, men can feel really rejected or disappointed when they've gone through planning something for their wives and their wife was like, oh, that was
right. Fun. Yeah, it does. It does suck.
Yeah. And it's so not personal because we either weren't given the appropriate guidance or we just maybe we're thinking about something else, like the unintentional hurts that happen when we're disappointed by each other's reactions. And I think that can be really wounding for men, and a way that women accidentally wound men a lot is not reacting to them at the level at which they would want to feel seen and desired for what they did or acknowledged for what they accomplished.
Right. I think that the vulnerability that women are in, to be in a state of receiving, is kind of understood by both sides. Like, this is a vulnerable place to be. Yeah. Like, in order to be in my feminine, I need to receive. And in order to receive, I
have to trust you.
Right. It's up to you in terms of what you give. But there's also a tremendous vulnerability on the man's side that I'm going to do my best. I'm going to put this together. And if this is not well received,
I might feel some type of way.
Yes, exactly. Like, there's a risk.
Right.
There's for sure a risk there, right? Like, that first night I planned, and it wasn't received well because of the timing of the flight. And I didn't think about it and everything else. Like, that did not. It didn't feel good, right?
No,
it doesn't feel good,
way.
Right? For sure not. And I find that a lot with men when they're making money, right? So their career is building and they're excited, like, hey, I just got a 20% raise or whatever it is. And they come home to their wife all excited about that. But for them, it's falling short, especially if they're on that status train, right? For them, it's falling short. And that can be extremely demoralizing for men. And it makes it very difficult for them to pick up from there. I've seen it. I can think of more than one example of a man who was like on an upwards trajectory in their career, which from a career standpoint, like, things were going great.
Right.
But when they came back home to share the good news, it wasn't met with this, it wasn't received well.
Right.
And as a result, it created a hurt and a wounding that was difficult
And create
to recover
separation.
from.
And I think this
And it
goes
hurts
back
our
to
career moves also.
It comes back to the attunement. I'm not emotionally attuned to my partner in that moment. Like if I'm not emotionally attuned to my wife when planning date night, I might misplan or misproject her expectations or
Right.
what she needed. If I'm misattuned to my husband when he's bringing me something about his achievements, what I'm doing is I'm missing the opportunity to connect more and validate, like, that is so exciting. Tell me more. How do you think you're going to balance family life and these new responsibilities? Right. Because probably the reason why she might be, again, guessing, a general response for a woman is, wait, that means you're going to be working more. Like, I need you. Right. And that fear of your success is going to threaten my security of care.
Or sometimes it's just not enough for the woman yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Or not knowing how to celebrate
Exactly.
what somebody feels. So there's this idea of modeling emotions with children. And maybe I've talked about this on here before.
I don't think so.
If my kid makes a drawing, so it just happened yesterday. My daughter made some scribbly drawing and she found it in her backpack. She brought it and she, Mama, look what I made. And if I went, oh, okay, that's nice. What I did was I didn't match or mirror her emotional response to what she was showing me. So this is for children. They think maybe I didn't feel the right way about that. Right. Whereas if I would have been like, oh my God, that's so cool, I'm going to put it on the fridge. It's a simple difference in attunement. I'm matching her emotional reaction to something that she did. And what the message that she gets is that how I feel about myself is correct.
Right,
and so
understood.
In relationship, if we misattune to our partner, it can bring up that wounding of misattunement in other areas, or I don't feel validated and seen for who I am as a person. And that's the vulnerability in relationship, is the intimacy of being seen I'm just so excited about the fact that I even got to the point where I could get a 20% raise.
Right, exactly.
And even if that's not enough income for the wife, to know that, like, wow, that's so amazing. That's so exciting. You worked so hard to get here. And we miss the opportunity to mirror each other's emotions in a way that validates each other as a person.
Right. And for a child, the likelihood that they draw another painting is low.
Or they're not going to bring it to you.
Right. And for a man, the likelihood that he gets that next 20% raise is lower.
Yeah. Or the likelihood that he's going to plan the next date night. Like, the fact that you pushed through and kept planning date nights, I had the thought earlier, I was like, that's about your strengths. Because I think there's a lot of men that would be really hard for, to continue to push if their wife or person that they love feels disappointed in something that they tried to do. Right.
I guess in this one, I mean, there was an obvious, like, I didn't come in thinking I hit it.
Right.
Like,
there was
hit
obvious
10 out of 10.
errors.
I was like, oh shoot, like I missed that. So there was a part of it that was humorous, but yes, a part of it that also wasn't, like, that was mine to say. Yeah. Right. But there was another part of it that was, that did feel unreceived and doesn't. Right. It does force you to, or force me to dig a little deeper for the next one. It's like, okay, am I willing to take that next risk? Okay, so I understand it from the men's side. I'm kind of curious if a couple is in this space of that power struggle, or that woman in the masculine and the man in the little boy, then how does the woman, can the woman do something to get out of it? You mentioned ask, but can we put a little meat on that bone? What can a woman actually do? She's frustrated. She doesn't want to be in this space. It's not feeling good. I think for the man, we shared certain things that could be done. Maybe that's the job of the masculine, is to always initiate that change. Can the women do anything?
I think the biggest thing that I see women doing that are blocking themselves from changing that dynamic is that they continue to overfunction. So I'll pick up all of the slack that I see or don't trust that my husband will pick up. So another, like, just easy example, it's like, I really would love it if my husband swept the floor while I did the dishes after. And I asked him, and he doesn't do it, so I always sweep the floor. And in a couple session, what I would say, I was like, so what if he didn't sweep the floor? I can't do that. Like, but you're asking for something, it's not happening, but you're doing it anyway. And again, obviously nobody wants to step on crumbs, and nobody wants a messy floor, and you don't want bugs, and so it's very hard to let go of that. But women overfunction to compensate sometimes for the things that they're requesting to receive. And we have to be willing to step back and feel uncomfortable that if I don't do it and it doesn't get done, can I trust that my partner will step up when given the opportunity? Without like watching or tit for tat, or again, like this competitive or assuming that my needs aren't going to get met. Like coming back to this place of safety, like a woman, an unsafe woman will tend towards her masculine, like we were saying earlier, is that I don't feel safe that if I let go, somebody's going to catch me.
Right.
And they might not for the first week or a couple weeks or something like that, but I have to at least give them the opportunity and the space in a loving, compassionate way, because if I'm just jumping down their throat every time I have to sweep the floor, or you never sweep the floor, I'm being passive aggressive, it's not giving them the information of what it actually means for me to do. It's just telling my partner, I'm disappointed and you're not doing enough, which is like kryptonite for a man. It's instead saying, like, again, going back to that, like, I would feel so loved. It's like so nice. I love it when using those words of expressing what I want in a way that doesn't invalidate what they actually are capable of doing. And I think that this is where there's like a balance, right? Because there's a reason why a woman would feel unsafe around a man to take care of her. And that might not be about the husband or the partner. That might be about something else for her, and the responsibility to heal my relationship with the masculine, or the ways that masculine energy has been harmful, or unhealthy masculinity has harmed me or left me feeling disappointed or uncared for.
Right.
And so that I can give my partner space, or be able to communicate that when you do this, I don't think you don't want to care about me, but it just feels the same as X, Y, and Z. Again, going back to like typically in most functional relationships, we don't want to harm each other.
Right.
And if we really understand where it's coming from and be like, oh, of course I'll sweep the floor. I didn't realize how much of an impact it would have on you that I did it. I thought you were just trying to hound me about something, and I'm tired from my day, and you don't see how tired I am.
Right, I
Again,
understood.
the separation. So women have to be willing to step back, feel uncomfortable with underfunctioning, allowing that space to be received, and then owning the ways that masculine energy has been harmful and led me to acting in a way that I wouldn't trust or feel safe with a man.
And then given that space, see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like saying, my wife used to say to me, if I don't plan date night, it wouldn't happen. I said, how do you know?
Yeah. You're always planning date night.
Exactly.
Same thing. If I was complaining, I wasn't. If I said, my husband never drives, and I'm always the one who has to be driving and stuck in traffic or something. Well, when did I get out of the driver's seat? When did I go to the passenger seat instead of just walking straight to the driver's side every time? Right,
exactly.
That personal accountability or personal responsibility. And I mean, I think, again, it's so, every dynamic and relationship is so different, but when we're talking purely about the masculine and feminine, I think that men can also kind of feel like they don't have a role in the family once there's children involved. Right. And so even being able to say, like, I know that it can feel like I do everything all the time, or like you don't have a spot, but like, here's your place. Like, it's so important when you as a father do X, Y, or Z. Like being mindful as a woman that I can give the space for a man to feel connected to the family. Because of that package of hormones for those first 7 years, women can be very focused on, like, I'm doing everything and I'm the only one who can do it in the most effective way. And I'm going to be more careful than my husband would be, so I have to do it anyway. It's like, if my husband takes my girls to the park, like, I have to not say, like, you have to watch them, right? Obviously, he knows he has to watch them. And men feel very differently about their relationship with their children than women feel about their relationship with their children. And we have to be willing to surrender that we can't always control, because that our job is to allow space for another human to give or create and be, instead of being the ones to always be over functioning and hyper aware and hyper on top of. And it takes a lot of effort to not get in the way of a relationship between father and children as a woman.
Right. As you're speaking, I recognize that my wife is quite good at this, where she'll tell me, so I won't know, like, okay, what am I needed for here? The kids are fed,
Right.
the kids slept, like, what's my job? I do take the kids to school. I don't have to, and she doesn't need me to. It's just, okay, hey, this is a great time for me to take the kids to school or camp or whatever it is. But she'll often tell me, as she did this morning, hey, I think our son or our daughter needs some alone time with you.
Yeah.
And then each time I tell her, it's like, okay, great, like, I can be useful here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's almost immediate when, especially if we're in a loving relationship or we feel like our cups are already a little bit full, at least. It's so much easier to step into those things. It's interesting. Most of my life, I didn't want to have children. And now I'm having 3 in 3 years. So,
Right.
And part of the thing that shifted for me was meeting, not my husband, which he knows this, but I met a man. Didn't end up in a romantic relationship with him, but it was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, I think I could have children with this person. There was qualities and characteristics and views on life that I hadn't really experienced, and it made it like an option in my mind. And I was like, oh, well, that's weird. Like I hadn't had that before. And this also goes into would I on my own, without a healthy masculine energy, felt empowered enough in my feminine energy to choose to go through having children? Probably not. Because on my own, my imagination of what having children meant about my womanhood.
Understood. I mean, you had to experience that through a man. You had to
Yeah.
see a man and feel this way.
Yeah, I don't think on my own I would have felt that, because it was so much about what I was losing by having a
You're
child.
talking about your husband, right? I hope so.
It would be nice, right? No, he knows that it was before him that I.
Okay, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize.
I'm not betraying him
I
by
got you.
sharing
Okay.
that. No, it was a
But he
friend
just
that we
opened the
like
possibility.
casually dated, and
Yes.
but it was like people are in our lives for reasons, seasons, or
Yes,
lifetimes
yes.
type of thing. Like I think the reason for this person was just for me to realize that like I could have kids with a healthy partner.
Right, it planted the possibility
Yeah.
of it.
And
Okay.
that I actually have any want to, because prior to that, having children to me meant overpopulating a world that already had neglected children, to bring a soul into this world to suffer. A lot of really negative things because of my own experience and not getting my needs met as a child. So I'm like, why would I volunteer? And then for me, it felt like a compromise of myself as a person instead of an enrichment of my womanhood. Felt like I was going to be invisible. I'm automatically become lesser as a woman if I choose to have children. I had a lot of really complicated stuff to work through. And it was through the energy of a healthy masculine that it ever opened me up to the possibility that maybe I want to have children.
Right. I guess it's not uncommon to have a kind of, transitional relationship that leads to the relationship. I think in my own story, like one of the impediments I had to a relationship was that it's incredibly low self-esteem, in the sense that this is, pre-recovery from addiction and pre a lot of the work I did, that I wouldn't be loved, right? So taking someone through an incredible series of tests, and she wasn't one that I was, she wasn't Jewish, and she wasn't someone who I was going to marry for other reasons also, but seeing that someone can still look at me in that way. And it wouldn't have worked if it was the person I ended up marrying, because I put way too many tests.
Same. Yeah, no, it would not have worked in this situation either.
But I say sometimes transition relationship is important, but it did kind of plant the seed of possibility, even though there was plenty of doubt that maybe someone can love me enough for a relationship to work. So I can see how that can be important. One thing I can add to what you were saying earlier about what a woman could do is, which, when I think about date night and stuff like that, is now, at this point, my wife is very expressive about when it does work well and that it does, and the specifics about it. So it does, I do feel very received. Like, for example, last night we had a date night, and this morning she sent me a message. I don't do completely different things. For me, I like to I like new, I like adventures, I like things I haven't done before. So I'll take a lot of risks with it, whatever that means. But it won't be going to restaurants. Like, to me, like, if I go to a restaurant for a date night, like, that's a major failure. Like, that was like, I didn't plan something. Like, what happened? And if there is a restaurant involved, then it's a restaurant plus something. Like, that's, for something else. And being well received. Like, this morning, she sent me a really nice message about yesterday's date night, whatever it was. That feeling I've received gives me the energy to, okay, like I'll take bigger risks. I'll put more planning into it, because the more that goes into it, the greater the risk of, the greater the hurt if it's not well received. Like last night, a lot went into it. So like if this one wasn't received well, it wouldn't have been so good. But it was very well received.
And I think this also comes back to when we acknowledge the feminine or we acknowledge the masculine in our partner, we're feeding into the healthy energy that they'll then bring the next time.
Right.
What you focus on grows. Right? And there's many sayings about this, like whatever you're looking for, you'll find it. If I'm looking for my husband to fail, I'll find it.
Right.
But if I'm looking for all of the ways that he cares for and loves and shows up, I'm going to find those. And so that's where I think that partners have a huge control over how the relationship is going, male or female, is what am I looking for in my partner? Am I looking for the ways in which I feel disappointed or not heard? Or am I looking for the ways at which which they do take actions that validate and empower, or where I could ask them, because my perspective is going to change the way my partner shows up with me.
Right. Understood. Yeah.
And I think that it's hard to be expressive. I think this goes into love languages and that type of conversation. Some people have a hard time expressing verbally their appreciation. They might show it when my partner needs appreciation, and
right. In a different way.
In a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess another way of saying it is what we appreciate appreciates.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so
about ourselves also. And that's, I think, the other piece of this is, do I appreciate myself for the effort that I put in as a husband? Do I appreciate myself for the way that I show up as a wife or a woman in the world? Or am I buying into the negative beliefs that I've still cycled over and over again? And I do think that the retreat is going to talk a lot about that, is the beliefs of what I believe about women, what I believe about myself as a woman, and where are those beliefs possibly impacting the way I show up, and inviting there to be a space where we're able to soften and be vulnerable and let go of those.
Okay, so, right. So the way I'd say it's not a women's retreat in the sense that it happens to be all women.
Right.
It's a women's retreat in the sense that it's about being a woman, a woman. Okay, beautiful. I hope that those who attend get a lot from it, and other facilitators do.
Yeah, I'm confident that anybody would attend would get a lot from it, just because I know how much I'm showing up in it.
Right.
And that sets the energy, and I know how much our other facilitators are showing up in it, and that sets the energy for the participants to have a really safe place where we're already excited about inviting them in to step into these experiences where they can meet their inner womanhood and their feminine energy or their divine goddess. I mean, there's so many different words that we could use for it. So I'm very excited to provide this service. Yeah.
It's important work. And having led 2 retreats now, and we're planning our 3rd as well, end of March, it is extremely, extremely rewarding. There's a lot I've gotten from it, and not just within the retreat itself, but that I've been able to bring back home and bring back to my business. It's challenged me and helped me grow in ways that other things have not, obviously, because they were still on the table to be worked out.
Yes. There's always more work to do.
Yes.
As the title of the podcast suggests.
In search of more. Yes. Yeah. More work or more fun to be had.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Have a great one.